Hey guys, Jacob from Lack of Foresight Gaming here, joined today by Mr. Phil Yates. You might know him as one of the original designers behind Battlefront's Flames of War systems. We're going to talk a little bit about some stuff regarding Flames of War. But first, I wanted to talk with you, Phil, about your amazing looking game, Angels 1-6. You're rocking the t-shirt for it. Can you tell us a little bit about what Angels 1-6 is?
Yeah, Angels 1-6 is a miniatures dogfighting game, World War II, set in the Battle of Britain for the first release, which is coming to Kickstarter in July. So everything's pre-painted. This is literally what you get out of the box, aside from the KLB individual aircraft ID markings, which are decals. And I always say this because they're the sweetest decals I've ever used. I'm very impressed with the manufacturer on that one. Um, and yeah, the game. Oh, the flight stance.
Oh,
Doop,
that's cool.
doop, and it's a little magnet, so you can dive, climb, whatever you like. That bit's all cinematic. The data that's of interest is your height,
Mhm.
and on your cockpit display here, you have your airspeed and your actions, which is your pilot's situational awareness. You've got probably about here weapons, yep. And then up here, you've got all of the data about flying the aircraft. So the turn sequence just starts from the left, goes to the right. Very straightforward and easy to learn. Most people pick it up in a turn or so. I've had people come to a demo, get the demo, play a turn, and the second turn they're helping the people who are a little slower on picking things up, and on the third turn they're teaching the person who's just walked in and joined the game.
Nice.
So um, quite straightforward. So um, yeah,
Cool. Well, I do have to ask. I'm really bad at dogfighting games in general, especially on the computer. With that variable height, does the rules have like any rule? Does the rules do the rules have a way to replicate that inertia of the dives and the sharp turns?
yeah, yep. One of the things that makes Angels 1-6 pretty unique amongst most of the available dogfighting games, whether it be space dogfighting or aerial dogfighting at the moment, is that physics actually works. I really, really, really dislike the games where physics don't work. So you've got your height as we demonstrated before.
Mhm.
So gaining height costs you airspeed, and of course, diving gains you airspeed. So that's going to adjust your little airspeed dial here. And that literally is the speed you're moving on the table. So say we started at 7 and we'd gone all the way across to a dive, which is about here somewhere, I think. And it says it costs you one action and 3 airspeed.
Okay.
So prior to doing the climb, not dive. Prior to doing the climb, we would have moved 7. So we have this rather helpful little ruler, and I'm going to use the
Oh,
measurement at the moment. So you start there, and you would have moved across to 7. But now that you've done your climb, you're only going to move 4. If you did a turn, you'd probably slow down even further. So basically, everything you do slows you down apart from diving. And at the start of the turn, your engine gives you some more power. So on a really powerful aircraft, you can just throw it about every turn using up all available speed. On earlier aircraft like the Mark 1 Spit here, your power's only 3. So if you're down at stall speed, you go up to 5, and then you do a few things. And then you go up to 5 and you do a few things. And then you hope that your buddy can come and help. So you've got a little bit of time to actually get your airspeed back up and have a little more maneuverability.
okay.
But in terms of just jumping back to um, dogfighting and ability and not knowing about dogfighting or knowing about dogfighting, one of the things that the physics does make is it makes it fairly simple. One of the demos I did last year, I had a couple, I think they literally were a couple, but 2 people come in and start playing a game. And they ended up in a classic sort of position in a dogfight where they were sort of pretty much side by side. And neither of them had played aerial war games before. Neither of them had ever thought about dogfighting or how it worked. But they promptly, using the simple matter of the physics and trying to work out what they wanted to do, they started doing what's called a scissors, where they started crossing over to avoid being the person in front of the opponent. And later in the game, or a different game, somebody invented the yo-yo, which basically is up, slow down, and then come back down again.
Nice.
Um, so yeah, people are basically inventing the basic and advanced combat maneuvers just because the physics work and they know what they want the aircraft to do in the game, what they don't want to do, i.e., get in front of the opponent. So it's really intuitive in that sense that people just go, oh, I really don't want to be over there. What can I do? I've got my brake to get some initial offset.
Mhm.
I've got climb, I've got dive. Then I'm going to have to move whatever I've got left. And then, so we've got brake going left to right, brake, climb, dive, and then move. Whatever's left on your airspeed indicator, you're moving, and then turn at the end of the movement. And you've got shoot, shoot, and shoot. So if somebody's foolish enough to position themselves right in front of you, yes, you can really hammer them. And that happens often with bombers because, of course, they're not maneuvering. But fighters, you usually don't get that opportunity. But you can break in and shoot, or you can do a big maneuver and shoot at the end. So, not sure that was very clear. I felt like I was
I
getting a
think
bit distracted, but I hope it was exciting.
no, well, honestly, I know we originally set this up to talk about Flames of War, but now you got me really wanting to talk about Angels 1-6. I gotta ask, with so the dashboards that you've previewed there, or I guess I should say the cockpits,
Yep.
they're the core stats of the fighters. Is there any representation of, say, special pilot stats or anything like that, or is it all just up to the player itself?
Well, in the base rulebook, in the core set, every pilot, everything is 4 plus.
Okay.
So getting actions 4 plus, motivation, bravery for things like not freaking out when your plane gets hit or staying in the fight when you're down to the last dregs of your flight is all 4 plus. But there will be a campaign pack with the release, which will allow you to have your pilots with their own individual skills and tricks and things like that. So, knife fighter, hey, I'm really good at shooting at short range, or sniper, I'm really good at shooting at long range, or I'm actually a mechanic and I've tweaked my engine a little. It's got a bit of go faster. Of course, you have to get some experience from surviving dogfights to be able to pick those up. Um, and the campaign is basically starts in over Dunkirk. So at the end of the Battle of France, the RAF is desperately trying to cover the withdrawal, while the Luftwaffe is trying to stop them. So we've got battles going on then. At the end of that, there's a slight break, and in the break between each phase, the RAF pilots basically, or the RAF squadrons, head up to Scotland or somewhere quiet, get some time to rest, recover, get a whole bunch of new pilots and a whole bunch of new aircraft, because back in January 1940, the British were like, well, this is going to be a long war. We reckon we're going to lose 250 pilots a month and 250 aircraft a month. So therefore, we need to start scaling up for that. The Germans, on the other hand, were like, nah, we beat Poland in 4 weeks or something. We beat France in 6 weeks. It'll be a piece of cake. And so in the break, instead of getting replacements like the British do, they just get a chance to gain some more experience. So they start the campaign with very experienced pilots because they've been flying in Spain, they've been flying in Poland,
Yeah.
they've been flying in France and so forth. Whereas most of the British pilots have literally no combat experience unless they've been flying Hurricanes in France.
Mhm.
So And the early British aircraft had two pitch props, so they could go fine and coarse. And it's always wrong. If you're climbing, you want it in fine. If you're trying to go fast, you want it in coarse. And of course, it's like a two-speed gearbox in a car. You're revving, and then you sort of drop it into second, and it's like chug, 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 chug. We're picking up. They changed that during the Battle of Britain to constant speed props,
Hmm.
which improved things. So their aircraft were slightly outperformed by the Germans, and their pilots were better. So the British are starting the campaign a little on the back foot, but they've got these replacements coming in. They can afford to lose pilots and aircraft, whereas the Germans are at a lot lower rate. So the second phase is the um, Battle of the Airfields, basically, when Aldertag, when the Germans tried to destroy the RAF, and a lot of fights going on then, and then another rest period, and then on to the Blitz on London, when the Germans basically split off from trying to destroy the RAF on the ground and tried to destroy British morale um, through bombing.
Mhm.
So, yeah, and of course there are bombers and so forth. I don't have any
I
right with me at the
was going to
moment.
be my next question. You've shown off Supermarine and a Messerschmitt, but what other planes are coming?
Hang on, man.
I gotta know.
These are all rough 3D prints, unlike these Messerschmitt and the Spitfire, which are actual manufactured examples.
Mhm. Oh,
Heinkel
J-Wing.
111,
Oh, a
German,
Heinkel. Oh, I'm not good with planes, but I love them.
yeah, big bomber. Um, uh,
Stuka.
Gullwing Stuka.
Yep.
For the British, we have, for those who don't recognize it, which is going to be almost everyone, a Handley Page Hampton.
Oh, Page, yeah.
And, oh, I forgot to mention that, of course, yep, there they are behind me.
Hurricane?
Hurricane, yep.
Yeah, okay, I knew that one. And that's a Ju 88? No,
No,
87?
it's another Messerschmitt.
It's another. Oh, is that the Night Fighter one?
The one that later was a night fighter. At this point, it's a day fighter.
Okay.
It's the ME-110. So the
Uh,
109 is their little interceptor. And when they designed it, they thought this was going to be a defensive fighter, and this was going to be the one that was going to be all offensive and go and do the attacks and escort the bombers and so forth.
Funny how that
And in
works.
fact, prior to radar, the design didn't have, had some merits because the idea was that they would go in ahead of the bombers, strafe the airfields before there was any warning, and then take anything that was trying to climb for height, they would gun down while the bombers were doing their thing. Unfortunately, radar meant that the fighters had climbed for height and knew where they were, which made them a little more challenging. But they still got a very heavy armament in the nose and a radio operator with a tail gun, and they're very robust. So, depending on your style, it's sort of like the Hurricane versus Spitfire thing.
Mhm.
If you want a something fast, agile, and aggressive, the Spitfire is great, but it's a little fragile. If you're more well, actually, I don't want to be a super duper fly all over the place. I just want to survive and shoot things down. Then the Hurricane is more robust.
Fair.
So you've got your different styles of aircraft and things.
Oh, that's very exciting. So it's going to start with the Battle of Britain. Depending on how the Kickstarter goes, what would you say your next plans might be, if you want to talk about
If the Kickstarter is successful, so don't wait for the second one. You've got to make sure the
it?
first one's
Oh, I
successful.
will
So
be jumping in
everybody, not just you, but
100%.
everybody out there, back the first one so that the second one will happen. And we're looking at the moment at Midway.
Oh, okay. Yep. Cool.
Yep,
I love it. I like it. Sorry, my one friend Ty, he's been trying to get me to play dogfighting games. Battle of Britain, Battle of the Pacific. Those are his two favorite eras. So, oh yes,
yep,
he's gonna love this.
yep, yep. No, if this keeps is successful and keeps going, we'll just go across the whole war and yes, eventually I would love to do your favorite fighter, whatever weird and wonderful one that is.
Well, I think you've got it covered with the Hurricane already, for at least me.
Okay.
But no, that's perfect. So July is the Kickstarter start, you said.
Hmm.
When in July?
Probably through the whole of July.
The whole? Okay, perfect.
That's the
And
current intention. We're still sorting out bits and pieces at the moment. I mean, this is, as you can see, a little wobbly and sellotape together, but this is the box art that has just been sent over to the manufacturer to produce some samples, and we're almost about to the point of having boxes with stuff that we can send out as demos to people and so forth. So we're getting close to actually just switching from making sure it's all going to happen to going on to mass marketing and trying to spread the word and so forth.
fantastic. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to when that comes out. I will be on that Kickstarter. I can guarantee you that.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
is
Now,
there anything else you'd like to mention about the game?
yes, angels16.com. Go to angels16.com and sign up for the newsletter. Now that you mentioned the newsletter, that reminded me, because that will keep you up to date with progress. There's lots of information about the game there, but also if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll get a freebie when the Kickstarter comes out.
Cool. Yeah, we'll put a link down below in the chat, guys.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for giving us a brief look on that. Oh, you got me super excited now. I don't even want to talk about Flames of War. Oh man. Well, let's just jump into the questions.
Yeah.
Aside from the ones that we had about Angels 1-6, do you mind, just for the viewers, could you give us a brief rundown of your gaming and game design credentials and history, I guess, just so people know.
We'll go with histories rather than credentials because aside from the stuff that I've produced, well, we'll go through it historical. Um, yeah, when I was a kid and Star Wars was coming out, the first one, my mum told me when I got home from school, oh, there's this thing called wargaming. I've been playing around with little Airfix plastic soldiers and so forth, and setting up all sorts of displays and wondering what to do now. And so Mum took me to the public library, and I discovered Donald Featherstone and Charles Grant and all of the other British authors. Of
Hmm.
course, being in New Zealand, we didn't get any of the American ones. I think Scrooby, I think, was one of the early ones in America. But yeah, so that got me all excited, and I joined the Christchurch War Game Society. But even then, it was like, well, a lot of this isn't matching what I read. So, being a World War II fan in particular, we were playing WRG's 1925 to 1950 rules, and they were probably good for the early 70s and definitely the best thing around in the 70s, but they just had a lot of problems. So that moved me towards looking at, okay, how do I write some rules? And so after university, I wrote a set of rules with a friend that were frankly not necessarily that great, but it started me into things. By the mid 90s, um, I was working on a game that was large scale. So you commanded a division,
Hmm.
and each stand was or tank or stand was a battalion. Sometimes two tanks to the battalion for the more strong ones. And my wife having a game of it was like, this is boring. You should do something more exciting. About that time, Warhammer 40K third edition came out. And down at the game store, I saw a copy and opened it and looked through it and thought, well, this might fit the bill of more exciting. So I started writing Warhammer Panzer battles, which, for those who remember, Games Workshop and Warhammer had Warhammer historicals, particularly Warhammer Ancient Battles, which was James Morris's work, I think, and was pretty good. Um, so yeah, I got a contract to do Warhammer Panzer Battles to go with Warhammer Ancient Battles, um, and was doing demos around, it was 2000 at our NatCon, National Convention. And then I was right beside Battlefront at the time. They had their display of the old camouflage boxes with the white resins for those who remember way back when.
Oh,
And I looked at them and thought, they're cool, but I was playing with Airfix and Revell and Italeri 1/72nd, 1/76th. Scale was a little dubious back then because you took what you could get.
nope.
Um, and So I was demonstrating with those. But a friend of mine had collected some Battlefront stuff and they were in the local gaming store and he said, "You should write a game for this. I want this." Um, and then while I was doing I finished my demo, Peter Siminovich and Colin Craigie came over and said, "Can we have a game?" I was like, "Sure. I don't mind who I demo to. I have no idea who you are." I ran a demo and they went away. And then either later that afternoon or the next day, they came back and said, "We'd like you to write a game for us." I was like, guys, that's a really big task, and I'm currently working on another one. Oh no, we'll pay you. It's like, yeah, okay. No, no, tell you what, why don't you come up to Auckland, bring your wife up, we'll put you up in a hotel and we'll have a meeting for a weekend and discuss things. Well, at the end of the weekend, my wife was at that time doing an art degree and said, "Well, my turn to have some fun as well. And I'm going to take a year off and work for Battlefront and write a set of rules for them." She was like, "Oh, okay." Um, yeah, significant pay cut and all the rest of it. But yeah, 25 years later, I was still working for Battlefront, still on my sabbatical.
Fair.
So that's how that came about. And that's basically I mean, I wrote lots of games and the various bits and pieces over time, but that's the genesis of Flames of War.
Well,
The other
that
side of
explains
things
it.
is I'm an operations researcher, or what, trained as an operations researcher. That's what my degree is. So that's management science. Those who've come across radar and submarine stories and so forth. It was the operations researchers whose job was to figure out how to take technology and actually make it work. And then after the war, they went off into business and tried to do the same in business. And so applied mathematics and a lot of cleverness and simulation and so forth goes into all of that stuff. So my games have a fairly solid mathematical background, but because I'm also a storyteller, I want the player to be immersed in the story
Mhm.
and not to see the mathematics. So, as you know from Flames of War, there's not a lot of math in it, but
And what little I
there's,
often struggle with.
sorry?
And what little there is, I often struggle with.
Yep. But things like the armor ratings and the anti-tank ratings and the movement and so forth have some fairly sophisticated models behind them. Now, people argue to whether the numbers are right or not, but they generally produce a result that matches historical outcomes without having to get into the old charts and tables and so forth of the 1980s games where, okay, we have the list of 25 hit modifiers and where exactly did we hit? And you could spend 5 minutes just doing one shooting roll.
Yeah, we don't need to go campaign of North Africa level. No, that's awesome. And that does actually explain a little bit. 40K third edition to the fourth edition era was always my favorite era of that rule set. So I definitely see a little bit of the inspiration, especially in the older versions of Flames of War, kind of bridging into that. It's probably why I've enjoyed Flames of War so much over the years myself. Um, and yes, you can definitely tell that the math is there, as you mentioned, with the armor penetration, and I mean it's simple math, but my brain, I'm a clerk, I don't need to know numbers.
Well,
But
that's why we keep it down to +1,
yeah,
-1,
yeah, no, I like
and no more than a handful of modifiers. Well, the number of modifiers has grown,
a little bit.
unfortunately. It's now up to 5 of them,
Yeah.
um, which is too many in my opinion, but it's
Well, I
still
mean,
okay.
it works. It works.
Yeah. I mean, one of
But
them's for night and one of them's for smoke, so
oh
it's not
well.
too bad.
I never get to use the Night of the Smoke because when I'm playing Team Yankee, it's always against things with thermal, and it's just whatever.
Yep. Let's play in daylight where I can see what I'm doing.
Right? If they're gonna have that, I might as well have that. So no, that's good. And kind of bridges into the next question. What, if any, specific philosophy do you hold true when you're doing game design? And do you find it's changed over the years?
Um, Story is the main philosophy. I start with what I want the player to experience, how I want them to think of the game during and after the game. So for Flames of War, it's this person is a company commander. We are going to play a battle that would have lasted quite a few hours, but we're going to do it in 45 minutes to an hour and a half, maybe 2.5 hours, depending on things.
Mhm.
So it needs to be fairly a simplified version of that. They're not going to make, and of course, they really don't want to make the long and complicated and difficult decisions that a company commander actually has to make under fire. But we want them to have the experience of being a company commander. So they have a company or so of troops. They get to issue orders, do big sweeping maneuvers, do fighting combat, and so forth. And at the end of it, the story they tell should be about their plan, how their plan came out, how their plan didn't work, how their luck was good or bad, what went on in the story of the game, not about the mechanics of the game. It's not, hopefully, the story at the end of it won't be about, oh, and then I did this thing to get another +1. And then it's like, that's not where I want the game to be. I want the game to be in the story about the game. So yeah, I sent my Bren carriers over towards the objective because I wanted to force the Tigers to have to split up so that they could stay there. While that was happening, I set up my 17 pounders to hopefully deal with the Tigers and move my tanks in a big sweeping move with my infantry supporting them to try and take the other objective off, blah, blah. And that's the level of story that I want the game to have. With Angels 1-6, it's about, oh, and then I pulled up and pulled hard around and nearly got on his tail, but then he broke left and dived under me. But then I was like, okay, well, that's good. You're out of the way. I'm going for the bomber. And then a great feat of shooting. I shot down one Stuka and then I swung over and shot down another Stuka just in a single pass. It was just awesome, blah, blah, blah. So my job as a games designer is to try and make the game get out of the way of the story.
Fair.
So,
And I would say I think you guys have been fairly successful at that. Often, and I've had some pretty bad games in the last 4 years now filming for YouTube. But it never in my mind, it never sticks out as, oh, the rules messed me up. It was always, man, that 160 mil on that hill, if I could have just crushed that, I wouldn't have lost my entire Grenadier company. Like it's always been the story. You know, yeah, one of our Sicily games, I left them in soft skin trucks for a turn, and that was a bad idea. But it's always been the story like that sticks out in the head of anyone that I play with, or any of my games. Like, and so I 100% think you guys have nailed that on the head.
cool.
Um, so no, that's awesome. So it's always been that way though. It hasn't been a change or progression to that point over the years, you would say?
Um, I think it was, excuse me for a moment.
Hmm. Sorry.
I think it was the failure in the story side that got me into games design myself. So, back in the WRG days, like a lot of games back in the 70s and early 80s, they were overly focused on the technical. And so you had things like um, we were playing with little 1/300 scale miniatures at the time, but I've got my platoon of tanks, and there's a tiger over there, and I move a little bit forward, and one of my tanks dies, and I can't respond. I move, and movement was always so tiny, and I move a little bit further, trying to get to some cover or something, and okay, that's pretty much the game over. I did decide once to try an infantry attack. I took a company of infantry, I think it was, put them in trucks, of course, because the game was way too spread out, drove them up, dismounted them outside a village, and tried to launch an attack. And I had multiple platoons against one platoon, and there was literally nothing I could do. It's like, I'm not even sure. I mean, okay, I was 13 years old or 14 years old at the time, but it's like, I literally have no idea and knew the rules pretty well what I can do at this moment to make a successful attack. Um, and so it was that sort of thing that made me want to write better rules and stories. I mean, back then, Blue Max has been the inspiration for almost every aerial game that's been published since. So it's the I pick a maneuver, you pick a maneuver, we do stuff. And so that was the aerial gaming back in the late 70s that I was introduced to, along with rotating maneuver sticks so that you had a nice arc and so forth with different pivots on them and different, yeah, it was all very complicated, but it didn't, again, match the stories I was reading. I'm on your tail, I guess, and they try all sorts of clever things for it, but I'm not literally on your tail, but I guess that you're going to go left, you go right. And it's like the moment you start doing that, I'm, quarter of a second later, I'm going to be sort of reacting. It's not how it works.
Hmm.
So that led me, even back then, to be starting to think about how, and jumping back to Angels 1-6, it's like Flames of War. It's a British turn, German turn, British turn, German turn, because that allows you to, same with Flames of War, why it doesn't have the alternate activation and so forth. It allows you to plan and have a coherent battle. Whereas if you've got alternate activations, basically you've got a whole lot of turns. Each turn you have to make a new plan depending on what your opponent did. And it's very reactive. If the game doesn't support tactics, which a lot of games don't, then that's fine. It adds some interest to the game. But with Flames of War and with Angels 1-6, the goal is that story, that supporting of tactics and so forth. And by allowing you to go, okay, my lead pilot is going this way, the wingman is following him, the other pair are going to go and do this, and they're going to go after the bombers over here. Right, that's what I'm doing. What's your response? And because, sort of like Flames of War as well, the responses that are available to your opponent are predictable, then you know what your opponent is probably going to do. Now, they may surprise you over to the sides, or they may go, oh, actually, I'm just going to run away now, and because I want to be over here. But mostly, you know what's going to happen in the next turn or so. Luck, your opponent going, well, actually, I'm going to do this. And you go, oh, I didn't think that was their plan. But,
Hmm.
and same with the aircraft thing, you can predict it's going to be somewhere in here and somewhere in this height bracket, and I've got to allow for that. So you know what's going on, and that enables you to have that coherent story, enables you to have that coherent strategy so that you can go, okay, I'm going to push my tanks around this flank. My infantry are going to assault over here with support from another platoon of tanks.
Hmm.
And you know that that strategy will hold together, at least until your opponent does something concrete to break it apart. But it's not going to be because one little thing changed or you couldn't move your infantry in time or something. As a company commander, your troops are fairly predictable. I mean, apart from when they get pinned down or, bad things happen. But, if you've got a reasonable idea of what your troops can do, you have a reasonable idea of what your troops can do.
Hmm.
You order a platoon attack over here,
Hmm.
and hopefully what's sort of going to happen. Hopefully you've given them enough fire support and you've given them all that and so forth. And it's like, yep, that's happening. This is happening. And so, yeah, it all comes back to the story thing and keeping the rules out.
No, no, that's awesome. So, story focused rules, not getting in the way of the gameplay, essentially.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So kind of on the flip side of that, and I'm kind of going
Yep.
a little bit in a different order to how I've listed the questions. I do apologize. How do you approach gaming? Like for myself, I'm story first, very narrative and historical focused, versus a lot of people are more competitive focused. I know I've seen some posts on the Facebook groups. You do tournaments every now and again, but when you're coming and you just want to say, I want to have a game, how do you approach it?
Um, I'm very wide-ranging
Okay,
in that I'll happily turn up to the club and expect the likelihood that somebody will be there, or somebody said, "Oh, Phil, let's go down to the club today and have a game," and it's essentially a tournament game. They bring their force, I bring my force, and it's like, "What do you got?" Ah, that's interesting. Oh,
hmm
well, let's set up a table and find a good mission that we like and make it happen.
fair.
So there's that, and I enjoy tournaments mainly for the social side. It's good to catch up with everybody you haven't seen for a while and so forth. But having said that, I have won tournaments and placed in tournaments and so forth, and scored or been awarded a number of best sport awards, which I'm also very happy about. Um,
Those are the best ones.
Never the same time, though. It's very rare to get um, incredibly good
Yeah,
sportsmanship rating and beat the
and
hell out
also
of
beating
everybody
everybody.
enough to win the tournament. But that's okay. There was a point where at which I was getting fairly well up on the tournament scores, not getting into the placings. And it
hmm
was like, actually, I think I'm becoming a less desirable opponent in tournaments. I am going to focus entirely on just enjoying the game and making sure my opponent enjoys the game for the next few tournaments.
Okay.
Because, yeah,
No,
winning
no,
is winning, but
yeah, but like as you mentioned, like it's the social aspect you're going to. You're both going to have a game. It's that
yeah,
social contact between both players.
yeah.
So, no,
At
that's totally
the
fair.
very other end, there's a group of us who get together annually in a memorial for a friend who died, who was a big gamer. And yeah, I usually set up a historic-based game, usually with between two or three 6x4 tables,
hmm
and interesting arrangements, T-shaped, L-shaped, or just long, or just wide, or whatever. And one of the ones a while back was Operation Cowboy. Don't know if you've ever seen the Disney movie, but
Yeah.
at the end of the war, the Austrian the Austrian white dancing horses.
Okay.
Yeah, the stallions were in German hands, but the mares were very close to the front lines. And the authorities were like, no, there will be no retreat, so we don't need to rescue the mares. They sent somebody to the Americans and said, "Hey, look, do you think you could help us rescue the Mirs before the Russians arrive?" This is in the very last stage of the
Okay.
war,
Okay.
because if they get them, that's the end. Because they'd gathered the Hungarian stud, the Italian stud, all of them into this one group. So there was nowhere else. So the Americans and the Germans did this raid to get the Mirs, and then they did this big horse droving to get them all over to across the American lines. At the same time, a very similar time, the Russians were trying to recover all of their Don horse breeding stock from the Germans. So the game was all about trying to recover horse herds and herd them home.
I'm gonna
And
have to look that up. I love that.
yeah, it turned out that I was the Germans in charge of getting the horses safe. And my name, Philip, by the way, means loves horses. My mum gave it to me because she loves horses. So my other German player, who was, thought that we were just playing a simple battle where we were trying to hold the line and keep the Germans away. So he was sort of watching me move these horses about and not really engage the Americans. And it was like, I don't know what's going on here, but okay, let's keep fighting. Let's keep fighting. And then suddenly my forces start racing towards the Americans with all the horses, so that we can get picked up by the trucks that the Americans, for some reason, were sending in right behind their combat troops. Um, and he was like, "You dastard! You!" I never thought that that's what you were doing, sort of thing. He had no idea. So it worked really well.
Oh, fantastic. I love that. Yeah, I'm gonna look that up. Operation Cowboy, you said?
Operation Cowboy, yeah.
I'm gonna know. I'm gonna look that up. I might have to do a game about that. Um, yeah, and now this one's kind of off the cuff. It's not on the list. When you're putting together a scenario like that, what's kind of your process behind? Like, do you do a little bit of research on the history? Do you just kind of already kind of know it kind of thing? Like, what's your brain process in setting up a historical
Well,
scenario?
for Operation Cowboy, I went to the library and got the two books that have ever been published about it out and
All of
rewatched
those.
the 1960s Disney movie, so that I refreshed myself because I watched it as a kid
Fair.
and read occasional snippets and articles about it. But it was like, okay, I really need to remember what's going on and find out the story. So once I got the story clear, it was like, okay, time and motion. The most important thing for a historical scenario is time and motion. Can the critical things happen? In this case, it was how far can I actually move horses during the 2 or 3 turns at most that I can expect this to be happening? And what can I do to make sure the Americans will advance fast enough that they will cover the 6 to 8 feet of table that I want them to cover without being stopped and bogged down? And then it was the same on the Russian side. Okay, they have a tank battalion and some infantry, and they're going to move faster because they're not coming through the woods that the Americans are coming through and so forth. So gave them a little more space and made sure that was an L table and made sure there was an impassable wood in the corner of the L so people couldn't cut the corner. They had to go right the way around
Somebody
the
would.
long side. So time and motion is the first thing. Whatever the thing you're trying to do, can it happen? Take hill 112. Okay, we need to make sure that the game is starting close enough to the critical moment that we have time in the 6 to 8 turns that our games sort of get to before everybody's definitely had enough and wants to leave. Do we have enough time for, say, the attack to take the hill and then the counterattack to come in? So the attack to take the hill is going to take 3 turns and the counterattack 3 turns, which means that the counterattacking forces either need to be 3 turns further back or they need to be brought on as reserves and so forth. So it's all time and motion stuff. And can the attackers take the hill in 3 turns? What do I need to do to give them, looking at the historical things and so forth, to give them that edge that they will do it? So yeah, work out the story and then time and motion.
Option. Oh no, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to keep that advice in mind myself when I do my next couple of games for early work. Because the last game, we did not think at the time of motion. It was a slugfest, and we never got the chance to actually finish it. So just to go back to the list of questions I had, can I fire these off a little quicker? So one of the ones that we wanted to ask is from a logistical standpoint, from game
Yep.
design and whatnot, what challenges and benefits have you found to developing your games in New Zealand? It is a little isolated.
Yep. Well, the good news is that the internet solved a lot of problems. So when we were doing Flames of War way back in 2000, 2001, we did it on the internet. We had weekly updates to the rules. We had people playing the game and feeding back and so forth, um, which was really great. And that global community got rid of a lot of the problems. Other than that, shipping. I mean, we have a big enough community in Auckland here that finding enough players to um, play and play test and so forth, plus having international play testing across the internet. But shipping, yep, it costs a lot. So for Battlefront, they started manufacturing in New Zealand and then moved it to Malaysia, which is very close to the Singaporean shipping hub. So nothing really comes to New Zealand before it goes anywhere else. In fact, for quite a while, Battlefront New Zealand was supplied from the UK, which is sort of weird. But
Side of the
so
world
yeah,
to
we'd
the other.
ship them halfway around the world to UK and then halfway back again to New Zealand, which took a wee while. So
Sure.
we'd get them like 3 months after everyone else. Um,
Army
so
window.
everybody's got we'd get a couple of copies of the books and a few bits and pieces, but everybody's all excited. They've got their books and their models and so forth. It's like, no, how much longer are we going to have to wait for ours?
Fair. Totally fair. Yeah, that makes sense though. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, awesome. The next question, and this one's kind of for my group of supporters. We're curious. When we're playing our games, our meta on the channel is very combined arms, but also mostly infantry focused. Because again, I'm trying to make our games more based on the history, so we don't usually take a lot of tanks, or when we do, they're not the main focus. Which is very different from the wider meta I'm seeing online. Whenever you look at a lot of tournaments, it's all tanks all the time, all armored cars all the time.
Yep.
How do you find, if it is different at all, that playing in New Zealand is to the rest of the world? Like, how's your meta, I guess, is what I'm trying to ask.
Well, the points in the initial thing, which were very much let's see if it works, did underprice light armor, which
A
for
little bit.
yeah,
I'm
for
just I'm
tournament
guilty of that
players
myself a
who
little bit.
were very focused on winning,
Yeah.
that made infantry highly unattractive. So that put the focus on tanks and so forth. Hopefully, the dynamic points are changing that a little bit.
They've helped a lot.
Yeah. In New Zealand, the tournaments basically split into a dozen or so people who are quite competitive,
Mhm.
and the vast majority who are less competitive. And we have a lot of tournaments that are events that aren't particularly competitive at all, like Panzerschreck and so forth. And we also encourage people to come along and play their first game at a tournament because it's a great environment. It's like, oh, I want to learn. Oh, there's a tournament in a little bit. Why don't you come along? And you won't be playing the competitive players. Try to make sure they don't play the competitive players and get clubs in the first round. And then after that, they'll be playing in the easier pool. And we've had people in their first tournament actually perform very well because it's fairly easy to pick up and they've read the rules before and so forth. So yeah, the middle block are people who are just here for the fun of it and have no real expectation of winning. So they'll just bring whatever they think is fun. There's the people who always end up down the bottom and they're here for the social and they still enjoy the games. And then there's the hardcore people who always think about how is this force going to be optimized and so forth. But they're usually playing amongst themselves. Me, I usually start with, cool, what do I want to take? Oh, for instance, it was like, I always wanted to see how Stuarts work in the late war. It just seems like a really, really dumb idea. Okay, I'm going to take a Stuart company and my forces are generally fairly historical based rather than planning on how I'm going to win. A Stuart company, a tank destroyer platoon, a reconnaissance platoon, an armored rifle platoon, um, and oh, we've got some points for aircraft. Okay, we'll take some Thunderbolts as well. Remarkably, it actually did quite well, apart from the fact that I bumped into Churchills, KVs. I did defeat one of the Churchill forces, but anything that wasn't heavy tanks, I actually caused them, even the heavy tanks, I caused quite a lot of grief because I wasn't engaging them directly. I even defeated a panther tiger force. Uh,
Nice. Oh man. So no,
because
no fins
basically,
backed up with king tigers.
sorry,
You wouldn't be the one doing the fins backed up by king tigers.
no,
Good.
no, no. My Finns would be lucky to have any artillery and tanks.
Sure. Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome. It sounds like I got to come to New Zealand to try some tournaments because I don't go to many here in Canada, but the ones that I have, it's always like almost pure competitive players. So it's never really a fun time for me because I mean I probably could play competitively. I've definitely got the reps in at this point, but it's not fun for me. Like
not
I
what you're there
want to
for.
bring, yeah, exactly. I
Yeah,
want to bring my
yeah,
Canadians in Italy that have zero tanks with them because they didn't have them at the Mora River. Oh, well,
yeah.
I guess I'm boned.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are distinct cultural approaches across the world. The Poles are extremely competitive. America has a very legalistic
Hmm.
approach to the game. Britain has a more combined approach. They a lot of their players play cricket,
Hmm.
to use a phrase, and but there are some tournament competitive players there as well. So they're closer to the New Zealand model. Italy seems to be quite relaxed. Spain has a few really competitive ones, and a bunch don't seem quite so. So yeah, it depends on the both the gaming culture and the national approach to things, I think.
Fair. Well, I guess I'll just have to start hosting the events I want to see. Or come to New Zealand. I mean, I've got more than enough reasons to. Um,
Oh, you're
awesome.
most welcome to come over. I'm sure
Well,
you'd be
my spouse
well
wants
looked
to,
after.
100%. We've always wanted to. We'll get there. Um,
Good.
now, perhaps the two biggest questions of the list. When I first started playing Flames of War, it was I think 2010-ish. I think towards the tail end of second, going to third edition.
Yep.
Um, and I think I still have all my books. There, those intelligence books that were made for version 3 specifically, they definitely had a far more hard-baked historical approach to list building. Every formation was based off a specific, or seemed to be based off a specific instance in time. Version 4, gameplay is a lot more simplified, which honestly I like. I miss version 3, but I don't miss some of the complicated parts of it. Um, but the list building is a lot more freeform. And there's definitely a lot of stuff that has been taken out, I think, in the hope of getting to that point. Could you explain or just give a brief rundown of what led to that decision? And do you feel like it accomplished what you guys were hoping for?
The one of the problems that Battlefront was running into towards the end of version 3 was that the range was huge and a lot of it sold in incredibly small numbers. Some of those models only sold 100 or 200 across the world, across their life, which means they well didn't pay for themselves. And it made it very hard for the game to be stocked by shops and so forth because they had to stock 1,000 different things, some of which they probably would never sell.
Sure.
So going into V4, it was like, okay, we need to um, make the range more sensible. And of course, we were going into plastics, and plastics being very expensive. Anything that was going to sell would be in plastics, but there's only so many plastics. Sculpting and so forth takes time. And so the rate at which we could churn out plastics was limited. So back when the first Desert Rats and the Africa Core book came out, the thing was, okay, we can have so many plastics ready in time. And that is going to be the core of the book. And the non-plastics, stuff, the metal and resin that sold well enough to inflict on a retailer is this lot.
Sure.
So everything else, even though, we're sort of as enthusiastic about the weird and wonderful stuff as anyone, was like, well, unfortunately, it's just not viable. We can't afford to make it, and retailer can't afford to stock it. So we're just going to have to get rid of it. But then part of the thing was then, okay, we're going to do a second British book. and we're going to do an American book.
Mhm.
So how do we put, particularly in those two, for instance, the things so that we end up with enough releases for an American book, but by the end of the American book, we've got all of their major mid-war kit out, and then flow through into a British book so that by the end of the second British book, we've got the plastics for most of their stuff, and the order seems to make sense, and people don't go, why is this coming out now? And there are a few oddities that came from various sort of, okay, well, since we've got that in the kit, we will provide that variant, even though it's a little bit, it'd be better to put it in a later book or something. But it's just, yep, let's let people do it. And there were some times when it was like, no, those parts in the kit are absolutely no use to anyone until much later. So that was the range limitation thing. We were trying to focus on getting that down. And the other problem was, those V3 books were getting
Very
huge
thick.
and repetitive.
Yeah.
It was the same British rifle company with slightly different support and another unique special rule, so that there were literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of unique special rules that only the most dedicated tournament players could ever remember. So it was highly likely you're going to turn up and face a force and they were going to go, oh, but I can do this. And it's like, okay, that's not friendly to beginners.
Fair.
It's not helpful for anyone, really. The only people it helps are the tournament players who go, okay, so I take this force and weasel it this way and twist it this way, and that special rule, which is slightly broken, by taking this really odd combination that's not at all historical and nothing like the force this is based on, can do this.
Mhm.
So it was like, well, since they are all very, very much the same, let's actually just create the packet that supports all of them. So a British rifle company looks like this, same as every other British rifle company in V3 did. For support, well, we'll give them the right number of tank platoons, and they can choose what tank platoons they want because someone was supported by whatever at some point. So the idea was to create a envelope
Mhm.
that was hard to create completely and horribly ahistoric forces out of. Now, of course, the serious tournament gamers
They'll find a way.
probably go and do some weird stuff, but by and large, if you built a force and built a force under the version 4 stuff, it will probably match. So people go, oh, but I built a force out of Africa with panthers. There were no panthers in Africa. No, but that force looks exactly like the force that fought on the Eastern Front in this action here. Um, oh, but blah, blah, blah. Now, yes, over 2 years, you can do weird stuff like, okay, well, I'm only going to take early Panzer IIIs and Panthers. Cool. Okay. That's a little weird. Not completely impossible at the time. Don't know of any occasions when that happened, but there were definitely formations that still had numbers of that sort of thing around. But yep, you'd have to dig to see if you could find something that exactly matched that. But you're pushing the boundary there. Basically, your average gamer making an interesting force that they like is probably possible to find somewhere, sometime, that similar sort of force occurred.
Well, I think that's honestly part of the charm of version 4. Like it sounded when I asked that question, it maybe sounded like I preferred version 3. I honestly I think I like version 4 more at this point in my life. And I've definitely shown with my videos that it could still be very historically correct. You,
Hmm.
you might need to do a little bit extra work from the player's end of creating a list and theming it specifically to a specific battle, but it works. Honestly,
Hmm.
100%. Like you are correct. You guys have created that envelope that allows for all sorts of things. And with just a tiny bit of work, a person can either approach it completely from a historical standpoint or from the competitive side and finish
Hmm.
Tigers. Anyways, but like I said, I think that's the charm of the system. And I think for the most part, you guys have nailed that on the head. So Thank you. I'm sure a lot of the viewers will appreciate knowing that that's the reason. It is a shame about some of the weirder stuff and trucks. Oh, that okay. I gotta ask, trucks. Was
Yep.
that just a cost thing?
Um, Again, it was in theory, players were required to buy trucks for a lot of stuff. Yet, those players are likely never in their entire gaming career to have put those trucks on the table. So, yep, some
So
people did
yeah.
and so forth, but by and large, people were being forced to buy trucks. Like, who ever moves artillery? No
That's
one. But you've got to buy or had to buy trucks for them. Trucks with infantry. Well, yep, you might manage a turn where you move them at the beginning of the game and get lucky and don't get slaughtered for it.
yeah, I never do.
But basically, the problem was that they were a lot of expense for everyone involved, us retailers, and gamers that had very little part in the game. So by moving them over to an optional extra, if you like trucks and or had a style that suited trucks, a gaming style that suited trucks, you could do so.
Command cards.
And, that's great. If you're not at all into trucks, you don't have to pay any attention. The movement in version 4 is bigger than in version 3 in every respect. Frank Chadwick, back when you wrote Command Decision, in one of his discussions, said, there's no such thing as too much movement in a war game. And yep, I tend to agree. It's hard to have too much movement in a war game. Now, there should be things that limit the movement
Yes.
in terms of reasons you don't want to have all that movement. But if there's an open flank and nobody looking, you should be able to just go, fine, boom, do something about that. Rather than, I may have played a lot of older games, particularly Ancients or Napoleonics or something, where it's like, okay, I've got this really great opportunity here. I move my troops 6 inches forward. My opponent goes, oh, I see what you're doing. Start moving their reserves 6 inches forward. And we crawl across the table. And by the time I get there, the opportunity is long gone because my opponent's had so many turns to react. Whereas it should be, in my opinion, that for a game like that, oh, you've made a mistake. My turn. I am now about to exploit that mistake. You have one turn before I exploit the mistake. And if you read accounts and things like turning and changing direction and so forth were almost impossible. So it's not like people do in war games where it's like, oh, I'll turn and walk across the whole front. It's like, no, no, no. If you're in the frontish area and facing forward, you're committed.
Yep.
Where's your reserve? Oh, I'm
Well,
sorry, your reserve's in the wrong spot. Now you're going to have to fight hard here and come up with a plan that's going to take 2 or 3 turns, which has got to relying on the fact that my breakthrough is probably going to happen, and the game then becomes, okay, I've stuffed up. How am I going to recover? Rather than, well, may as well just go for a frontal slog because there's no maneuver.
no,
So,
I love that.
yeah. On the other hand, I have a British motor rifle company in half tracks,
Nice.
and my half tracks get plenty of play. I have had a game where my opponent thinks, oh, you're infantry. I will ignore this flank, except for sending a little bit over there, and come down on this flank. And on turn 2, I think it was, I think it took me that long to finally guarantee decide, my whole army up and decamped and moved in front of their army, while a trio of carriers cover the other flank, confident that if things went bad, I could up and decamp back again in the other direction. So yeah, it didn't go well for them attacking into 8 6-pounders and all my 17-pounders and a whole company of infantry.
Yeah. You sound like you play like my buddy Ben.
Sorry?
You sound like you play like my one friend Ben, who's always punishing me with his movement and assaults. Oh, that's
Yep.
awesome. Well, I won't keep you too much longer. One last question, actually. What is your favorite era to play in a war game?
World War Two.
Well, what part of
Within, hmm?
what part of World War II? That's a very broad time and era. Hard to pick though.
That's a really hard question. I mean, Normandy, when I was much younger, Normandy fascinated me, and it still does. Um, then the desert, though, particularly the New Zealand division's operations in the desert, um, and just the sheer, oh God, the British did what? Um, oh, so they destroyed another brigade of ours.
Yep.
The New Zealand division was pretty much over a period of a year destroyed by incredibly bad British generalship. Fortunately, there were enough troops coming in that it survived as a division and went on, but that was an awful lot of losses. And yeah, early war, Poland, the engagement between the Polish armored trains and the um, Wolinska Brigade cavalry against the 4th Panzer Division is fascinating. Cavalry against tanks, and the cavalry held for very good reasons, and they also failed the next day for very good reasons. But it's an interesting mismatch. And then France, 1940, um, just everybody had their ideas of what the war was going to be like and built their equipment and tactics and doctrine based on that. None of them were right. The Germans were righter than most, and discovered to their cost that their equipment wasn't really right for the job. So you've got all these mismatched pieces of equipment and ideas and so forth, all being thrown into a pile, and it's like, okay, great. I've got really slow tanks that have poor command control and actually rather rubbish guns. But if I can get my opponent to sit in front of me and get into a fight,
Yeah.
I win.
Yep.
The Germans are like, we've got light armor, light guns. So we really got to use this whole maneuver blitzkrieg thing and go, cool, we're all pouncing on that bit. We got that bit. They're coming over here. Whoa, now we better rush over here and do this bit. And oh, that objective's looking at, oh, now we'll dash over and take an objective sort of thing. So they've got to be completely on their toes and using every maneuver opportunity they get, because if they just spread out in a nice line and fight anybody, they will lose because they don't have enough equipment. The British, they're tanks. Yay, we charge around shooting tanks. Oh, they're not tanks. Uh, uh, now what?
Well,
So,
as
yeah,
someone that just did a refight of the Battle of Orp and made that mistake as playing the Germans and spreading out and trying to engage the entire front.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
when the Russians come out, they want their opponent to engage them across the entire front because they will slaughter you because they've got so many guns. But they're not very good at bringing their force to bear in a small area. So an opponent that can go, fine, we are going to engage this area, and the Russians go, oh, trundle, 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 and then they go, oh, cool, now we're going to you know dash through here and chomp up this bit. And if they can keep that sort of momentum going of chewing the Russians up piece by piece without getting too much counterfire, they can win. If they stuff up and let the Russians start mobbing them, they will go down in a screaming heap.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll have to pick your mind someday about the New Zealand operations in the desert. I want to do a Tobruk scenario at some point.
Okay,
And I'm
yep.
pretty sure they were there, right?
City Resig. Yep, we were the
Yeah.
ones that opened the way into Tobruk.
We'll have to talk
5th
on that.
Brigade, I think, at incredible cost because they 5th and 6th Brigade were basically left on their own by the British armor and so forth. The Germans and the Italians overran half the South African division who were coming to try and join up with us to create a big enough block. And then they ploughed in and wrecked one of our brigades. Our other brigade sort of then chopped its way into Tobruk and actually hid into Tobruk at that point. And the Germans closed back up again behind them, but the hole was still, they're never able to really reinforce that gap. And so then the New Zealand division turned around and helped the British break back out of Tobruk. Um, so, yeah, but
Excuse me. No, yeah, it's fun. Like one of the great things I've found about Flames of War is just the exposure to all that history of World War II that you just don't learn about. Now, obviously, growing up in Canada, we do have a lot more understanding
mm,
of that history than say maybe someone in America. Um, but like North Africa, pretty much all of the Eastern Front still not really touched on. Even
yeah.
stuff in the Pacific, we don't really learn about.
Canada had, compared with New Zealand in both wars, a much narrower focus
Very much so,
in
yeah.
that, apart from a little bit of operations in Italy in the Second World War, it was Northwest Europe the whole way. And so, and they did a fantastic job there. But yeah, New Zealand started in Greece, went to Crete, went
Yeah, Greece
to
too.
Tobruk,
Yeah.
then to after the counterattack that took Tobruk, we were abandoned at Mincar Kiam. The British Armoured Division that was supposed to be supporting us departed for Alamein, leaving the entire New Zealand division surrounded. A night attack in trucks. An infantry battalion just went through with bayonets, and the whole division in trucks just went through behind them. um, got to Alamein. In first battle of Alamein, we lost an entire brigade. At Alam Halfa, we lost an entire brigade. By the second Alamein, we were down to a two brigade division because the rate of losses just couldn't be kept up. And our other brigade was being formed as an armored regiment, armored brigade, because um, British armor was so unreliable. But yep, we led along with the Aussies, the breakout at Second Alamein. A artillery commander, Curry, his armored brigade was assigned to the New Zealand division. And when he heard his orders, he said, "That's going to cost me at least half my brigade." Monty apparently said, "I don't care if it costs you your entire brigade." The evening after the battle, a New Zealand brigadier went over to find Curry and said, "Where's your brigade?" There were about half a dozen tanks scattered around in Curry's HQ. And Curry said, "This is my brigade." "No, no, not your headquarters. Where are your troops?" "This is my brigade." Um, but they'd done their job and opened the way for the victory at Alamein, which amongst British armour at the time was sort of somewhat unique that they were willing to do their job intelligently and to that level of loss.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, and then we went over to Tunisia, fought there, and then southern Italy, went up the same coast as the
I was gonna
Canadians.
say you guys were in Sicily as well as on
I
the
know we missed Sicily.
Adriatic. Oh, you weren't in
Yeah,
Sicily. No, you were on the Adriatic coast in Italy.
Adriatic. Yeah.
Ah, yes, yes.
So yeah, when you guys were at Ortona, I think it was. Yeah, we were alongside on the Moro River.
Ah.
Um, we tended to basically swap.
Oh no,
So,
that's right. I do. Sorry. So my old unit, Hastings and Prince Edward, were involved heavily in the Battle of the Mora River. We were supposed to be the diversion to allow you guys to make the crossing.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah. And there were times when the New Zealand division actually took over Canadian tanks because we relieved your positions. And rather than try and get your tanks out and our tanks in, it was like, you crew walk out, we'll
They'll
just
take
walk the New
those.
Zealand crews in and take over where they are.
Oh, that gives me a fun
So
modeling
yeah,
video.
there's a lot of close cooperation on the Adriatic there before we got swept over to Monte Cassino, which was another bloodbath.
Yeah.
Then up through Florence and up to the Gothic line and then up to Trieste.
Such a shame the Italian front doesn't seem to get covered much.
Yeah, it's not particularly interesting fighting above the tactical level.
I guess that's fair. I guess. But it's such a fun, well, I shouldn't say fun.
Yeah,
It's such an interesting theater to study.
it is. It is. I mean, things like, is it Ortona was the big Canadian battle at late 43? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
just,
Late 43.
or was there a Sona?
Early 44, I think.
early 44.
Something
Okay.
like, oh, no,
Yeah.
no, yeah, you're right. It was 43. Little Stalingrad. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an interesting battle. And tactically, there were some interesting things going on both sides. But operationally, it was just one bludgeon after another,
Yeah. I mean, it's a
which makes it,
heavily defended area, a lot of
yeah.
mountains,
The
so
Germans did a good job of creating defensive lines, and the Allies did a good job of swinging their
tracking
way
side.
through them. But it's a series of defensive battles with nothing mobile happening between.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well,
Mm.
Bill, thank you so much for your time. I
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate you sitting and talking with me. Very much looking forward for Angels 1/6. Again, guys, check out that Kickstarter. It'll go live July.
Yep.
July. I'll put a link up on our channel, Facebook and YouTube there for you guys to check out. Is there anything else you'd like to say in closing, Phil?
Angels16.com.
Awesome. We'll check it out. And guys, thank you so much. If you want to support the channel, please like us, subscribe, and share us around. And remember, we're pulling for you. Just keep sticks on the ice. Take care.